Today on Comicstorian, it's time for another Green Lantern villain to return to the fold. This is the channel where I take some of your favorite comic books, I break them down into an audio drama, cut out a lot of the extra fluff and the extra lines of dialogue and the extra panels, and this allows you to know what's going on in the world of comic books, but leaves out enough for you to add them to your collection, such as mine, which you can have if you just go to your local comic book store. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Today we're going to be continuing the return of Hal Jordan as a Green Lantern. 2 videos ago, he was revived from the dead, and last video, we discovered that the Manhunters and a secret villain are still out there trying to battle against the Green Lanterns. Today, we're going to see the return of another villain as we continue to set up one of the greatest space operas you've ever heard of. If you want early access to these videos and many others, make sure you check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Comicstorian. Now let's get into the second half of Green Lantern No Fear. The 2 Air Force officers drive their Jeep through the desert late at night, discussing the woman that they hit on at the bar. But something catches in their headlights and they screech to a stop, slamming into a tall gray figure. What the hell? One hisses, and they both jump out, staring down at the strange alien creature which coughs, speaking to them. I just went out for a cigarette, it gasps. Meanwhile, over on Oa, welcome back, you poozer, Kilowog says to Hal as he flies over the home base of the Green Lantern Corps. Rings streaming through the air, heading out to the far sectors to find new candidates for the Corps. Rings have been deploying for the last 4 days and nights, the training officer explains, and he tells Hal that the Guardians decided to reactivate the Corps after Parallax was defeated, asking him to return to train up the new recruits. Good luck, Kilowog, Hal says with a smile, and they land among some of the new Lanterns who don't seem impressed with or even know who Hal Jordan is, which is fine with him. Hal looks at his old friend pulling off his ring. Alright, how about a round in the mud marsh, for old time's sake? Hal asks as he motions to the pool of mud behind him and he steps inside, talking trash to the training officer, making the new recruits look their way. Alright, Pooza, alright, but try not to cry, he says as he steps into the mud, and the 2 stand ready before rushing at each other, with Hal managing to dodge the first attack. But Kilowog is big, hitting him fast and hard. Their battle continues on for moments until a voice enters Hal Jordan's head. Oh, Jordan, wait until you find out what they've done. They're back, the voice says, and Hal hesitates for a moment, allowing Kilowog to win their fight. It's at that moment that his ring beeps, informing him that he has an incoming call to his apartment. Captain Jordan, this is General Stone. We could use the Green Lantern's help, the general tells him. It doesn't take long to return to Earth, where he finds the Air Force-based scientists doing an autopsy on the alien creature that was hit by the Jeep. He leans over the body after hearing the story of what happened, using his ring to do a DNA scan, and the ring gives him no answer. The verdict comes down to, it's a human, 50,000 years further down the evolutionary chain, and of course, everyone is shocked by this news. But before they can further investigate it, a call comes in from Belle Reve. An old villain of the Green Lantern Hal Jordan's has called, Hector Hammond. He'd like to let Hal know what's going on with this weird humanoid from the future. So Hal arrives at Belle Reve quickly, hearing the warden on how Hammond was seemingly growing more powerful. He quickly finds himself descending into the depths of the prison, with Hammond's voice sounding off in his mind. He's here! Oh yes, you're here! This will be delightful, the voice tells him, and Hal finds himself in the cell. The large, deformed head that is barely being able to be held up on the normal-sized body, looking over at him with drool dripping from his mouth. Hello, Green Lantern, Hammond says to him in his mind. I thought I recognized that voice in my head over on Oa, Hal says quietly, and Hammond doesn't move but tells Hal, they're back. Hal demands to know who is back, but Hammond tells him that he would like to access Hal's memories so that he can experience things through Hal Jordan in exchange for the information. I just want to taste a sliver, Hammond says to Hal's mind. At first, Hal does refuse, but Hammond reminds him that people will be hurt if he doesn't help. So he lowers his ring's mental defenses and his body goes rigid as he feels Hammond poking around in his memories. Going through the beautiful women that he's met, the adventures that he's had, sweat breaks out on Hal Jordan's forehead. All right, Hammond, you've got enough, he grits, but Hammond refuses, pushing deeper and deeper into his mind, going to Hal Jordan's family, his father, the Air Force, his life. It takes Hal Jordan retaliating, using his ring to poke around in Hammond's brain for the villain to finally release him. And that's when Hammond informs Hal of what is going on. That the strange creatures have done this before. They've created beings like him, taking people apart and putting them back together differently, forcing them to evolve. And now they're back, doing it again, he says in Hal's mind, but he doesn't know their name, just that they are in Coast City, checking on their experiments. The ring tells Hal that Hammond is telling the truth, so Hal takes off quickly. Meanwhile, over in Coast City, two lovers are swimming in the ocean late at night. The waters are dark around them when a man suddenly cries out in pain as something bites at his ankle. The woman screams as he's dragged underwater, and blood begins to fill it. That's when they see a group of sharks tearing into her boyfriend's remains. She continues to scream, swimming hard for the shore with a shark fin right behind her. But she finally reaches the sandy beach, breathing in gasps, thankful that she is safe. But as she looks back, the shark rears up out of the water, its body a mass of muscle standing on two legs. Meanwhile, William Hand is flying on an airplane, reading a newspaper, chattering endlessly about he lost his hand, how it was taken from him, but he can still feel it. It's a phantom limb situation, but that's when a light suddenly appears in the wing of the plane, and everyone looks out to see gremlins on it tearing through the side of it, chattering in a strange language. William Hand screams as they grab at him, pulling him with them. Meanwhile, again, over at Edwards Air Force Base, General Stone gets on the phone with Hal Jordan. I didn't come back to the Air Force to work for you, General, Hal reminds him, but Stone informs him that it's only because it's something important, that a military officer was torn apart in the bay. His family deserves answers, Jordan. There's a moment of pause before Hal agrees. Green Lantern out. He lands on the beach where the police are already working, telling him about both bodies holding up a large shark tooth. There's no shark that could have done this, the cop informs him, but Hal isn't surprised. Unfortunately, there is, he says, looking out in the ocean. He dives into the water, finding large schools of sharks filling the bay. And as he begins to create a shark cage around himself to protect himself from all of these large schools of sharks, he senses something near him. And that something is King Shark coming to battle the Green Lantern. Meanwhile, back at Belle Reve, Hammond is being showered down. He could still move, but the strange gremlin creatures are suddenly there crawling all over him. No, no, no! Green Lantern knows that you're here! Leave me alone! Leave me be! You've done enough! Hammond says in their minds, but they don't even acknowledge him. But back over with Hal Jordan, he has met King Shark before, and he knows that he is the forced evolution of a shark. The creature continues to crunch on his cage as Hal uses his ring to scan the contents of the shark's stomach, finding the remains of the two bodies within. And the ring also finds a tracker inside of that stomach. Let's get that out of you. I want to see who's keeping tabs on you, Hal says, but a voice suddenly fills his mind. Meat, who are you? What are need, think, eat, brain? King Shark thinks, breaking through Hal's cage, swiping and biting into his arm. You don't remember me, King Shark? I'm disappointed, Hal says as he uses his ring to knock the monster away. King Shark retaliates by slamming him through the water and into the hull of a nearby ship, declaring that he just wants fresh blood as he jumps on and sees the fleeing Navy seamen. He rushes after them, and now that he's distracted, Hal Jordan creates a giant fishing hook, snagging King Shark in the mouth. Do you remember me now? Green Lantern, you try stop feeding! King Shark thinks, roaring in anger, and he tries to bite on Hal's arm. But the Green Lantern is ready for him now, protecting his arm and raising it up, shooting the shark high into the air. Meanwhile, back over at Palmdale, there's a bright blue light and William Hand suddenly appears in the park, his skin all shriveled up and the plants around him beginning to die. He struggles to his feet, wondering what happened, reaching out to steady himself on a tree, and he looks up in shock as the tree dies to his touch, its leaves falling to the ground. His eyes widen at the end of his wrist, but as that tree is dying, he sees his hand disappear again. He looks up at that moment, seeing a hospital across the street, and he thinks to himself that he can smell the death. An evil smile appears on his face, and he begins to walk across the street. Back over with Hal Jordan, he comes out onto the deck of the Navy's ship, with several of the seamen pointing out where King Shark was still attacking. He points his ring at one of the deck guns that Shark is standing in front of. Plug your ears, sailors, Hal warns them, using his ring to trigger the deck gun. The cannon explodes, knocking King Shark back into the ocean, and Hal flies after him, quickly checking on the power level of his ring. No telling how long this fight is going to last. I better charge up. he says, creating a green hand that flies back to his apartment, retrieving the Green Lantern. He holds it up, beginning the oath, but that's the moment that King Shark leaps out of the water, grabbing Hal with his teeth. With that, they both dive back into the water, King Shark dragging the Green Lantern deeper and deeper. Darkness of the ocean beginning to overtake them. Hal is panicking. He knows that he's losing blood, and he'll eventually run out of air. He's still holding on to his lantern, shoving it into the beast's mouth. The shark chomps down on it, destroying the lantern and throwing them apart. Hal then begins to swim for the surface, but King Shark is already on him again. The lights suddenly stream around him, with something coming out of the ocean depths, slamming into them both and carrying them to the surface, and they realize that it is a large flying saucer, which breaks the surface of the water and just starts skyrocketing into the air. Moments later, the strange gremlins that have been altering everyone around them are on them both, grabbing Hal Jordan and the shark. Their language is bizarre, and Hal swears that he recognizes it, but it's not being translated automatically. Meanwhile, back with William Hand, who now looks closer to Black Hand, another former villain of Hal Jordan's. He's moving through the hospital, leaving death behind him as he sucks the life out of every patient, doctor, and nurse that he passes. He looks down at his withering evil hand, smiling as it once again appears at the end of his wrist. "How nice!" he hisses with an evil smile. Back over at the spaceship, Hal Jordan is unconscious, the strange gremlin standing over his body. It's the voice of Hector Hammond that fills his mind, waking him up. Hal quickly gets to his feet, trapping the strange creatures in a cage, asking his ring what they are. Gremlins, point of origin, Sector 2812, the ring says, explaining that they are a race of capitalist scientists that like to experiment on species and sell them as weapons to the other planets. "They're speaking German!" Hammond shouts into Hal's mind, and Hammond tells Hal that the creatures have been harvesting him and the shark. But Hammond's voice trails off as the creatures continue to remove parts of his mind. With this information that Hector Hammond and King Shark are nothing but organs for the gremlins to harvest, Hal suddenly feels weak, and he hears another voice. "All the bacteria inside of you just died. Stray weak cells will follow. You know what? You'll be the 23rd person I've killed today." Black Hand tells him, lifting his arm and beginning to suck the life out of Hal. "Death is good. Death wants you back, Jordan." But Hal creates a force field around him. Been there, done that. The ring then warns Hal that it can't stop Black Hand's new powers, and it begins to blacken on his finger. "You think you're strong, but death is stronger. It is the pure power at the far end of the emotional spectrum, the emptiness of space, the blackest night." Black Hand tells him, and Hal's force field explodes, sending him across the room. He tries to crawl away, but Black Hand comes up behind him, grasping him by the shoulder. "Being human means you have weaknesses like death. You may have cheated it, but you still reek of it," he tells him, but the whole spaceship is suddenly rocked by an explosion, throwing Black Hand away. Outside, the Air Force has arrived. A fighter squadron led by Captain Perlman launches missiles at the ship as the Navy bombards it from the ocean. Hal struggles away, finding both Hector Hammond and Shark in their harvesting tanks. The shark roars, breaking free, charging at Hal, but Hal quickly flies away, finding himself on one of the fighter jets in moments. He reaches up for the gremlins that have attacked him, peeling them off of Perlman's wing, but Black Hand is suddenly behind him. "Death wants you! I want you!" He snarls, but Hal shakes his head. "Sorry, you're not my type," he says to Black Hand, and they both begin to fall through the air, tumbling down to Coast City Cemetery far below. Hal looks up and he sees the gravestones of his family in the distance. "You had a chance in life, Green Lantern! No one else gets second chances. It's supposed to be over!" Black Hand tells him, reaching out for Hal. His hand closes around Hal's throat. "I'm not afraid of death!" Hal gasps, reaching out with his ring, creating a fist that swirls around and comes back at them. "But you hate it, don't you? You hate death!" Black Hand snaps, but the fist punches him hard in the face. "No, I just hate you!" Hal snaps at him, creating a blade that slashes through Black Hand's wrist, taking away his hand once more. "Without life, death is nothing," Hal says as he buries the hand beneath the earth. He then grabs Black Hand, slamming him into the ground. "Death has power. It's the true color of the universe, the most wonderful color, my color. Black Hand gasps as the earth falls in around him. With that, Hal looks up to see the massive spaceship also falling out of the sky. But he reaches out, creating a massive pilot that catches the ship. And with that, the adventure is concluded. But the villains still live. You see later Hal Jordan returned the gremlins to the Lanterns of 2812. And he stands in General Stone's office explaining that the Air Force has locked down everything that they could find on Hector Hammond and the Black Hand, though he admits that King Shark got away. Sitting in a stasis tube, awaiting his transfer, Hector Hammond looks over at the head of the Manhunter that sits next to him. "No man escapes the Manhunters," the robot says. "Oh, you're no fun to talk to. I hate machines." But his body shifts and he smiles as he tells the Manhunters that the gremlins did more experiments on him. "Things are a little different now," Hector Hammond says, but the words don't come out of his mind. They slur gently out of his mouth. Hector Hammond is now a little bit more capable of controlling his body. And that concludes Green Lantern No Fear. Now, if you know the storyline, you know that we're setting up quite a bit here on the return of Hal Jordan, different villains and different stuff. But we're about to deep dive into space to see more of the Green Lantern mythos. I hope you guys have been enjoying it. Don't forget to get early access over at the Patreon. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to keep these videos coming out, and make sure you check back next week for the next episode.